6 o'clock, we're going to get started. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Flags to my left. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just so everybody knows, this meeting is being recorded by Norton Media. If you are recording, please identify that. First item is vote to approve the minutes from January 26, open and executive session. Any questions or comments on those? Okay, entertain a motion to approve as presented.
We're doing just the regular, not the executive, right?
Yeah, you have to do them separate.
Okay,
So moved.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion to approve the executive session minutes as
So moved.
presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Warrants. Mrs. Cohen signed warrants for the total amount of $641,150.99, as well as $1,145,046.42. Enter those into the record.
One more.
That's all I have. And $1,110,385.58. Now for the student representatives.
Okay, so the JCS is celebrating Valentine's Day through their theme of adventure. Their students are trying to climb a mountain of kindness by committing 500 random acts of kindness between now and February vacation. Kids are spreading the love in lots of great ways and have already reached over 100 sticky notes of kindness on their mountain mural in the lobby.
And then from the Yale, they just wanted to mention that they were able to raise $22,000 for their Boosterthon Fun Glow Run, over $22,000, which will go directly to get some new playground equipment for their students. They did such a sensational job for the 2 weeks of Boosterthon, learning different character traits each day and then accumulating in the fun run in the gym last Friday, where they ran at least 35 laps to earn their sponsored funds. All students were so excited and truly earned everything they raised. We can't wait to have our new equipment put in this year. A huge thank you to our Hay PTO and all major sponsors for this major event we do each year.
So from the middle school, they're currently in their Spirit Week. So for Monday they have Pajama Day, for Tuesday they have Wear Red and Wear Pink for Valentine's Day. Wednesday they have Twins, Triplets, or Group Dress Up Day. Thursday is Country versus Country Club Day. And Friday is Adam Sandler Dress Up Day. Which we did at the high school and was a success. So we have, they said in addition we have various different fun activities taking place throughout the week, such as trivia at lunch, a photo booth, Valentine's for sale on Tuesday, and a Family Feud style tournament on the half day on Friday. And lastly, their signature Blacklight social dance will be taking place at Norton Middle School for all grades on Thursday of next week from 6 to 8.
And then from the high school, our Carnation fundraiser happening this week. Will be going out on Tuesday. And then we have some exciting things. Student Council started a monthly teacher recognition called the Faculty Member of the Month. This month it was Mrs. Bray, I believe, Mrs. Bray. And then the Norton High School PBIS rollout. Teachers began filling out postcards to recognize students who embody the values of respect, responsibility, and connectedness. Athletic update, Lancers have climbed 3 outright league championships in swimming, boys indoor track, girls indoor track, and hockey has earned at least their share of TVL titles. Girls basketball is still alive to capture a potential TVL title. Swimming and wrestling are competing at sectionals this weekend.
We have the coffee house.
Yeah, we have coffee house tonight. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next is recognition of Mr. Bilal. Dr. Beda.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, here elated for a gentleman who's spent his, I believe, his entire career here as a teacher, and probably one of the best decisions I've ever made as superintendent, which was to create a Dean of Students position at the Yale Elementary School and allow for the growth of that building. And so Mr. Balawa was recommended by his principal, Mr. Gagan, for nomination to the Massachusetts School Administrators Association. Mr. Balawa notes the following. Mr. Gagan notes the following of Mr. Balawa. Mr. Balawa understands the curriculum the intricacies of the elementary level and what young students need in order to be successful in their lives, not just their academic years, but in life. He's a master scheduler, the go-to person for our teachers, and at any point of the day, he can be found supporting the growth and success of everyone in our school. He brings positivity, promise, and personalization, end quote. So on behalf, Bob, on behalf of Norton Public Schools, we'd like to recognize you this year as the, on behalf of the association, the 2023 Assistant Principal of the Year semifinalists. Congratulations. Take a quick picture. That does not come with the raise. Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Mr. Chairman, just really quickly, I actually remember fairly well when Joe came to me and said, came to us, I should say, and said, you know, hey, we need to deal with some stuff with the, it's not working out, it's just the principal. And he said, we need to put a dean of students in place. I said, okay, well, what are we thinking? We got any internals? Yeah, we got an internal guy. And I did not know Mr. Blau very well at all at that point. But since then, I've come to know him a little bit, and I've kind of watched him. And I do have to say, you've done an excellent job at that school. Really proud of you. And you've gone through a couple of different principals now, I think, too. Third one. So, and they all say the same thing when they leave. It's like, that Bob, man, I gotta go. So, anyways, I just want to say great job. Fantastic job. Thank you.
We're hoping when basketball and off to college happens that he decides to take the next level.
Next step. All right.
So when the time comes, so it truly is. He was a masterful teacher, and taking a masterful teacher out of the classroom is one of the hardest things to do.
It's tough.
But when they work out to be a masterful administrator, you know you did the right things.
Right.
I think I can sort of speak to that as the teacher for one of my children, who I won't say how old she is now. But I do remember when you were teaching in the 3rd grade and you were leaving JCS, we were heartbroken. And then when you were leaving sort of your teaching position at the Yale, we were heartbroken. A lot of families missed out on that. But we are so thankful, because I do think, it's sort of to your point, Dinesh, really what a difference that school is. So thank you.
Next item is elementary math program, Dr. O'Neill and Ms. Dietz.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I want to introduce Mrs. Christy Dietz to those of you who may not know her. Christy has also been in Norton her entire career, and has taught 4th and 5th grade at the Yale School for a number of years, and is currently serving in the role of math coach, elementary math coach, which means that Christy works at all 3 of our elementary schools, going in and working side by side with teachers to improve instruction and to support all students. So we're here tonight to talk to you about the, can you see? 'Cause I can't see. We're gonna be, I'll move on. Can you see now, Kristen? No, come on.
I'll stand right here.
We're gonna talk through the elementary math review that we just finished, and some recommendations for programming. So the last time we actually did a full curriculum review in the area of math was in 2015, which sounds like it was yesterday, but really was about 8 years ago. And since then, there's been a lot of updates. DESE did release a new version of the math frameworks in 2017. We've done a lot of work specifically at the elementary level in terms of professional development with our staff, looking at guided math workshop, math talks. We changed the model here at the middle school. We used to have those double math in grade 7, and then we went to the academics and action blocks, and now we just have a traditional math block for grade 6, 7, and 8. We actually have 22 new staff members that teach math in K-8, whether they are teaching math as their core subject or a special educator that works with math. That's a huge amount of turnover in our staff during that time. There's also been a lot of change in research regarding what best practice looks like in the math classroom. So we were definitely due for this review. And we were very fortunate to be accepted into the Department of Ed High Quality Instructional Materials Network. And so what we did was we worked with the Department of Ed And we spent about a year in this learn and prepare phase. And that learn and prepare phase really charged us with looking at our local data, looking at our programs and our resources, and making the assessment, are we getting what we need out of our current resources? And our answer was no. We found that a lot of teachers were going and finding other materials, looking for ways to replace certain lessons. Oops, how did that happen? Thanks, Christine.
Is it this one?
Slideshow.
I can't see the phone.
All right, there you go. And so we went through that process. We pulled together a curriculum council, which actually spanned K to 12. Christy and I were represented there. Jason Ladino from Norton Middle School, Lindsay Costa, who is the academic coordinator for math at the high school, and then Kathy Magna, who is a math interventionist at the elementary level. And that was our core group. And we spent a lot of time looking at research and looking at data. And then we invited other staff members to join us, where we went through and we talked about what we want from our students as learners. Then we went into the investigate and select portion, specifically for the elementary level, where we took a look at what was out there. And I'm going to share some of the work that we did in that aspect. So there's a lot of conversation about curriculum materials, specifically in Massachusetts right now. The Department of Education is putting a lot of focus on what are we using in our classrooms, and there's a lot of grant opportunities for districts that are making shifts. There is a huge importance when you take a look at why curriculum matters in the classroom, and I shared some research here with you. And I think it's important for us to understand what makes something high quality. So when researchers go in and they look at curriculum materials, they look specifically first at the alignment to grade level standards. So are the standards being addressed? Are they assessing grade level content? Are they giving students exclusive work with grade level content? Are we asking them to do things that are grade level appropriate? And are they addressing the entire standard? So that's where they start with looking at the programs as high quality. They also look at the coherence across the grade level and making connections between the standards. They also look at how the program is developing students' conceptual understanding. And the opportunity myth, which was published a few years ago, talks about the fact that when students have access to grade appropriate materials and strong instruction and deeper engagement, they are much more successful in achieving grade level standards. And the reason that you see data about 1.5 times the difference between an average teacher and one of the 75th percentile, or greater than the difference between a new teacher and one with 3 years of experience, is that when you are given the opportunity to go off and choose other things, it's difficult to find curriculum or resources that are always presenting content at the grade level. So it's a really big difference there, and that's why it's so important that we have materials in our classrooms that are providing students with those consistent opportunities day after day. All right, so we had a couple goals here. We wanted to develop a consistent vision. We thought it was really important to make sure that whatever conversations we were having about math, we were having them across the entire district. That we didn't have one vision for our elementary students and then have something totally different at the secondary level. We wanted to bring consistency to the process. We wanted more of our teachers to be talking about the growth mindset and the power of yet. That students may be struggling. However, it's so important for them to have, for us all to have high expectations of our students and know that they're going to make that gain. All of our teachers, and Christy and Gia, who is our reading coach, we all talk about all the time the baseline of equity. And what that means is that students, regardless of which classroom they are in, should have some equitable experience when it comes to the instruction. We want to make sure that we're building common vocabulary and common learning experiences. Your mastery of math should not be a dice roll based on the classroom that you're put in or the school that you go to. So that's what we talk about when we talk about equity-driven selection. We also want to make sure that there are different access points for students. All of our students are coming into our classroom at very different levels. You might have a student who is a natural mathematician. It comes to them automatically. They know all their basic facts. and they can attack a problem right away with very little support. On the opposite end, you have students that really struggle with math or struggle with reading, and there are so many aspects of math that are tied to reading. So we want to make sure that all of our students are on IEPs, our students that are struggling, our students that English is not their first language, have the same opportunities to access the curriculum. All right, so Christy.
So when we got together as a group, and let me just say this was very exciting because as Jen mentioned, my entire career has been here in Norton, which has been for a very long time. And I have participated on many a committee and curriculum groups and so forth. And this was the first time that we did a K-12 group and had conversations, kindergarten to 12th grade, about a particular subject area. And it was great to have those conversations, as also the conversations of what the expectations are as we're going from elementary to middle and high school and so forth. So to create a vision for mathematics, discussing with everybody in one room at all grade levels was just exciting to see for Norton. So as we got together, we wanted to have some guiding questions as we were going forth and what we were going to look for. So obviously, what type of students do we want to develop? How do we want to get these skills, desired knowledge and skills? How do we want to assess? What's the role of the teacher, the role of technology, and how can we all work together to achieve these outcomes? So this is kind of what was guiding us as we were moving forward with the process. And this is our vision that I'll let you guys, but we were very excited, but this is kindergarten through 12th grade that we're all on the committee. We also wanted people represented, not just classroom teachers, so we asked for others to be, we had special ed teachers on there. We asked for, I'm trying to think, I don't think we wanted an EL representative, I don't know if we had an EL representative, but we wanted people from all different grade levels as well as from different areas. Really big for us was also this mathematical curiosity piece. The growth mindset piece was huge for us, as well as the application piece of how we're applying. Things have changed in mathematics. We're not looking for that rote, traditional, can you solve it this way, can you do it? There's a big piece, and if you look at jobs that involve mathematics and things, it's the application piece that they're looking for. They're looking how people can persevere and problem solve. And so that was a big piece when we talked to K-12, that's what teachers were looking for as well. So then what we came up with, and this is the first time as well, is looking for a, DESE, I have to say, did an amazing job in planning this out. They were very methodical about what you should be doing, who needs to be on your team, what you need to be looking for. And one of the things that they said is you had to have parameters, which are non-negotiables, and then you set up your priorities. Parameters included budget. There wasn't one time in my career since I've been here that we ever set a budget ahead of time. I can tell you that we oftentimes had piloted programs, we had spent the time and the energy as teachers, and at the end, when we went to present or say this is what we wanted, oh, sorry, that's way too expensive, once we got the quote, and we were like, are you kidding me? We just did all this work and this is what we wanted, now we can't afford it? So this was a game changer, was to have the budget up. We asked them for the quotes ahead of time. I even went to Jen and said, Jen, when we go to the team, can we actually present the quotes and the money to the teachers? Like, we've never discussed this with teachers before. And it was amazing what the teachers said right off the bat. There was one quote and there was something added in there, and they were like, oh, that's not worth the money. People aren't gonna use that. We're not gonna waste the money. There's much better ways we can use that money in the district. And it was great to see that teachers were thinking about how we can better use things. That's too much money. We're not, to knock that one off the table. It's not worth it, so forth. So these were our non-negotiables. We wanted, obviously, focus, coherence, and rigor. That goes back to our frameworks. The focus is, does it meet the standards? Coherence, is it the learning progression? How does that standard go from kindergarten all the way on and build? The rigor is your procedural fluency, your conceptual understanding, and the application piece. And then we wanted, and the other thing that we made very clear is there will not be any one book that is going to meet every single standard. Massachusetts has added their own into Common Core, so there are times that we teach something at a different grade level that's not at, for instance, the money standard is not in first grade. In Massachusetts it is, but in Common Core it comes later. So we expect it earlier. So I always tell people, I said, listen, your frameworks in Massachusetts is what we are going by. There isn't any one textbook. The textbook is made for masses, but we are looking for a textbook that is high quality, that is going to meet all of those things. And DESE laid out, as I said, in this process, very specific things for us to be looking for, and places to look for, as Jen's gonna mention. So it aligned with things, it fit within our budget, it had to be a 2019 edition or later. Our teachers really wanted to make sure there was a paper and digital component. There are some good programs that are out there that are not very strong on the digital side of things, but especially our 3, 4, and 5 teachers really wanted to have that digital component and felt that was really important. And then the priorities over there were the things that they were really looking for as we started to dive into looking at and narrowing down which programs we were considering field testing. We looked at our connection to the Norton Portrait of a Graduate, conceptual, procedural, real world. We wanted to make sure that we were doing the concrete pictorial abstract. K-1-2, one of the biggest complaints that they've had in mathematics is there was not enough hands-on kids diving in and doing things and objects, learning mathematics that way. It was too much paper pencil, they felt like. So we were looking for very much that piece of going from concrete to pictorial to abstract. Collaboration and discourse, central components. We wanted to make sure we had that. Obviously, a variety of instructional methods and strategies. Those were our main things. The other things that are not highlighted were things that we were also looking for.
So this was a long process. We kicked off in September of 2021. We kicked off with that leadership team that I mentioned, the 5 of us. We set our goals. We completed a full K-12 math review. We brought it to the Curriculum Council. We reviewed our local data and what we currently have. In the winter of 2022, we started with our vision planning. It was a very collaborative process. And then we began looking at curriculum resources that aligned with our vision priorities. And started looking for K-8. At the high school, we started really diving in and looking at standards alignment and really looking at what standards are we addressing in Algebra 1 versus Algebra 2 versus geometry. And then this past summer, our elementary planning for the field test, and then we conducted the field test in the elementary level. Currently ongoing, we're doing a lot of professional development at the high school with specific work around the standards in the courses. And then the middle school actually just chose their 2 programs for a field test earlier this week, which has been a lot of fun as well. I'm gonna go this way so you can.
No, yeah, it's fine.
Here, come
I mentioned already, so we looked at Ed Reports. Ed Reports is one of the places that we go that they will kind of analyze and look at and give a report for all different curricula, whether it be for reading, for mathematics, and they will give grades, and you will see whether they are meeting expectations or not. In addition to that, Massachusetts has done their own, which is called Curate, that they look at. And so they do not have as an extensive list because they don't have that in comparison unless the publishing company asks for them to be reviewed, then Massachusetts will review them. But we wanted to make sure when we looked at Ed Reports that all of these areas were aligned. And they do, they meet, if you look on there, they're in meeting expectations in the high end of them for focus and coherence, again, which is the standards and progression from grade to grade, and the rigor and mathematical practice, as well as usability for teacher and students.
So we looked at 2 programs over the course of our field test. The first one was a Reveal by McGraw-Hill. And as you can see, it's a little bit far away, but you can see all the green circles. Green's good. Reveal rated very, very high, meeting expectations for all of the core areas that Christy just mentioned. Focus and coherence, rigor and mathematical practice, as well as usability for teachers and students for all 3 levels. And this is something that was very similar to MyMath, which was our current program. And our teachers saw this and recognized the similarity and felt comfortable with it. And then the other program that we looked at is Stepping Stones. And again, as you can see, all green circles, all meeting expectations for focus and coherence, rigor and mathematical practice, and then the usability. So on paper, both programs were pretty comparable. They all met all of the criteria that we were looking for. So the next step for us was to engage in the field test.
So field test was different as well. What we've done in the past, we've asked a teacher, 2 teachers in each grade level to pick a program, and usually one teacher in one building, if we think JCS and LG, 2 first grade would do one and the other would do the other, and we would do it for the entire year. Usually in the end what happens is we have split. We've got some people who want one thing and some people who want another. And so this, actually Desi is the one who said we would want you to try a field test, not a pilot. And a field test is each teacher uses both programs, and each teacher then does a unit from each program and gives their feedback. So each has the experience with both. So that was very new for us. At first teachers were kind of hesitant and like, how are we gonna do this? I'm like, listen, math is math. If we're doing place value, you're gonna use it one, then you go right to the next unit and take another, and we'll be there to support you. It actually went easier than we thought. We were looking, the hardest thing in the end was now how do we align that to where everyone is using the old program and where they are. So I said, you are going to cover everything. We're gonna look. It's just that you've covered it maybe in just a different order. So they got together, the teams, and they looked at both programs. How are we gonna design this? How are we gonna make sure we are covering all of the things, units and standards? And then they made sure, we made sure that we had all the program components. We went in, observed classes at each grade level.
Which was so, so fun. We had
Yes.
such a great time visiting classrooms
Great.
and seeing the kids engaged in math. And we saw both programs in action. It was very, very fun to be able to see like the kindergartners versus the 5th graders and everything else. It was a great opportunity for us to see that.
Yeah. And we were able to, I was able to go in and model lessons. I had some teachers who were like, we've never taught it this way and so forth. And you're gonna find in the end in some results, the programs pushed our teachers out of their comfort zone. I had, in one instance, I had some teachers who were like, oh, we're gonna skip these ones. And I said, whoa, let's talk about why we're gonna skip these ones. And they're like, well, this is kind of confusing. And I said, well, how about I come in? I'll come in and teach those ones. And so we did it, and I kind of encouraged them to try some new things. And it was awesome because later they were like, wow, if you had never pushed me, I wouldn't have seen what kids can do, and I've never taught it this way. It was just a new way of teaching it. But they saw the value in it later and what their kids learned. So it was great to be able to do that and to go in and work alongside the teachers as they were doing this and support them.
So the program that we're recommending to you today is called Stepping Stones. You have books in front of you. The large books are it's one of the instructional resources for kindergarten and 1st grade. They're mathematical, second grade, thank you, they're mathematical stories. There are some teachers' editions there. There are also student editions there you can look through. And we wanted to share some pictures of our students in action with the programs, as well as some student and staff feedback as well.
So this first picture here is a 1st grade. So our 1st grade, it was funny, like I said, kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade, they were like, there's not enough hands-on, so I loved it when a 1st grade teacher said, Christy, I need shaving cream. I'm like, okay, so they were learning numbers, and they had to write their numbers up to 100, and they got to not only clean their desk with shaving cream, because I don't know if you know, it's a great cleaner, but they were writing their numbers in shaving cream, and then you literally just go like this, and then it's a clean slate, and you write a new number, and so they were learning how to write numbers. She said the kids had a fantastic time. It was very hands-on. This is showing you the other one. We have a digital version of the workbook.
Yep, so this is the students on their iPads here. And in a lot of cases, students have the option to choose between whether they wanted to write in their workbook or whether they wanted to do it right on their iPad. And if you can't see it because it's far away, but it's the exact same page, and this student is using her workbook and this student is using the tablet, and it all gets turned into the teacher that way. So it does give students choice as well, which is really great.
I also like on the digital version, they have the speech to text, but it's for every piece of the sheet, so the directions. So we actually had a student, I walked into a 4th grade class, and they had a new student who was an EL student, but we had another para who was working one-on-one. They were a one-on-one, and they happened to be sitting in between, and it was fantastic because they could put both students on listening, and they can hit it at their own pace to hear what was on the sheet, and it would be read to them, and then they could take their time. The other thing that I like about that is it supports our growth mindset piece, because at the end they can click submit, but then it'll show them which ones they got wrong, and then it'll say, do you want to try again? and it gives them the option to go back and to fix. So it's not, a lot of times in those digital ones that what we have, you click and submit, and it's gone to the teacher.
And you have no idea how well you did.
Right, this is giving them that feedback right away, and it gives them the option to go back and to fix it before they, and they have the option then to submit it a second time. And I saw that in a second grade class, and it was interesting to see how some kids would go back and like, I didn't know what I got wrong, and then some kids, oh, I see what I did, and they go back and fix. So this is really hard to see, and I
Do you
apologize.
see that he's covered in shaving cream?
He is, head to toe. So we asked for some student feedback. I did not get feedback from every student, but there were some questions that we asked, and you'll notice the purple is stepping stones, the blue is reveal. If some of the questions, just so that you can see, the math in this book connects to things about kids, my home, school, or things in my life. That's the first one. The new math activities allow me to share my math thinking with my teacher and my classmates. The new math videos help me learn. I like the centers. We asked about the centers both on paper as well as digitally, because there's both the paper ones and the digital ones. This one was using their math tools, like different math manipulators, base 10 blocks, so forth.
The math lessons in this new book are interesting. The new math book helps me show my math thinking using numbers, pictures, or words. So our students across the board definitely preferred stepping stones, and it was really interesting to hear their feedback as well.
And there was about 150 of this from the survey.
And these are a few more pictures of our kiddos.
Just the games, yeah.
Just some of the games that they have available to them are really
These two are
fun.
having a discussion
Yeah.
of their paper.
And then we're going to let you read these quotes. These are quotes from our teachers about stepping stones and why they felt that this was the way for us to go. So these are really powerful, and we wanted to share them with you.
It was great at the end, Jen asked on, when we had our meeting, she said, I'd like you to everyone to say what you, well, first of all, she asked, would everyone prefer to just send her what we choose and why, or do we
Like a
all
secret
want to
vote.
say it, secret vote? And everyone was like, no, we're just gonna say what we want. So everybody got on, and then she asked to not only say what you choose, but to say why you choose it. And honestly, these quotes were probably the most powerful to hear why teachers were choosing it. One of the things I think that stuck out to me is one of them said, you know, this one may not be, because this is not as big a publisher as a Pearson or a McGraw-Hill or so forth. So it may not be as nicely packaged in all of the little kind of features when you think of it digitally, but this is the one that A, I see my kids having enjoyment for math. B, they talked about that this is making my kids stretch as learners. They felt that all kids had more access to this. They found that their kids who were struggling actually were understanding and getting things. Then they said that it pushed them out of their comfort zone, and said it made me try new things and think about math in a new way that I hadn't thought about before. And they're seeing, as much as, there were several times that people said, I didn't think this was gonna work, this lesson was gonna flop. And then they were shocked at how it didn't, and yet the majority of their kids understood it better than what they were done before.
This is another quote from one of our staff members. This is something that we haven't discussed yet. One of the big components of stepping stones is that it has a spiral to it. So throughout the course of the year, students see concepts that don't typically come up until the end of the year. For example, time and money, measurement, geometry, and they're integrated into the unit, so they become a lot more familiar with them, and it's not something that teachers are rushing to fit in at the end of the year or right before MCAS. So that was a huge component for our teachers as well. It offers high quality, engaging, and developmentally appropriate lessons. Students are exposed to small chunks of a concept in concrete ways that foster understanding, even for students who struggle with math. It's all encompassing, spiraling, hands-on, tech savvy, differentiated, and the kiddos are excited about math because of it. We all know that as our students get a little bit older, that excitement starts to fade, specifically in the area of math. We hear people say all the time, I'm not a math person. I don't like math, right?
It's
And
not
so-
genetic, you can still like that.
Right, and so our goal is that kids come and they're excited. And we really did see that with this program, so. And just thank you all for your support and for considering. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I had one that kind of came to mind.
Sure.
So we've undertaken this for our mathematics teams. Is this something we could do for other?
It's already started for literacy.
Okay.
Yep, so I actually applied for a grant through the Department of Education, and I'm going to be working with our middle school team to go through the same process, and the department is going to pay for 50% of whatever we choose for the middle school. We just have to make that decision before September. We are going to be starting the same process with our elementary literacy group. Literacy is, of course, such a huge, huge undertaking. We want to make sure that we're doing it right. We want to go through the process with the amount of fidelity and thought that we went through this math process. So I would say we're probably another year out in terms of DLA for elementary. But yes, there are other districts that are also doing it with science, but math and literacy were the core areas for us at this point.
And those would probably be the only two that are really from K to 12?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and we're going to be doing the exact same thing, K to 12. We'll push middle school a little bit faster in terms of looking at resources and field testing, but that vision will be set together as a team just like it was for math.
What has the outcome been, Jen, for the change at the middle school from going from like double math to now you're just having sort of a single math period?
The data has not changed.
It hasn't changed.
And that's something that was a difficult decision for us when we made those changes, because we were looking at years of a lot of stagnant scores when it came to the middle school. And so therefore, in the process that we're doing with the middle school math teachers right now, we're looking at two programs that are so incredibly different than anything that they've done in the past, that they're extremely student-focused and problem-based, where students are given a problem at the beginning of a class, and the teacher is much more the facilitator. It's going to involve a lot of professional development for our staff, and it's something that we've made that commitment to. But as we say, and our small group has said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we are looking at it from a very different perspective. Christy has joined me in the middle school group to talk about how the process has gone at the elementary level, and also what skills kids should be coming up with, and helping them to look at this from a more student-centered approach versus the teacher delivering the lesson and the students going home to a lot of problems. So we're working really hard on that. They will actually be starting their field test in early March, which is really exciting. And then, we're constantly having conversations across K-12 to really bring everyone into this school. And it was interesting, when we wrote the vision for what we wanted math instruction to look like, we were split up into groups. So we had like a K-2 group, we had a 3 to 5 group, 6 to 8, and then high school. And we said to them, we want you to brainstorm ideas. What, in your mind, does a successful math student look like? And what would you want your students to leave morning with in terms of math? Every single group, regardless of what grade level they were looking at, talked about curiosity, growth mindset, not giving up, like perseverance and problem solving, applying the skills that they're learning in their classroom to the real world. So I'm like, all right, well, we're all on the same page about what we want it to look like. We just have to, work harder to actually fulfill that vision.
I got a few questions, rollout-wise.
Yep.
What are we looking at timeline?
Yep, so the goal here is, if approved tonight, Christy and I will start working with Orgo to develop a plan for professional development this spring, which means that all of our classroom teachers and special education teachers will have their teacher materials and engage in professional learning around the program before we leave school in June. During the summer, I have some grant funding where I'm going to be looking for math teachers at each grade level to come in and work alongside Christy and I to look at the scope and sequence and put things together in our own curriculum documents, so that when teachers walk in, not only will they have all of their materials, they'll have what it's going to look like in their classroom, the pacing guides, what our expectations are for delivery, and then students will be using the program when they come back in the fall.
follow-up to that, professional development, what is that going to look like? I think you kind of touched upon it a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there
I can give a
Yeah.
little more. So I've already met with our new rep. And part of this, we talked about having this be almost a 2-year process specifically for professional development. One of the things in talking with Jen was getting a new program in the middle of the summer isn't always the best, as teachers sometimes. And then in this fall, you get the actual program, but you're in it now.
Yeah.
And then you're getting the PD. So we talked about giving some PD prior to in the spring. And I mean, I ideally would love for teachers to try a lesson or two with whatever topic they're teaching, ask if they want for us to come in. But I've already been in talks with our rep, who will be our rep from Origo. She's already giving me initial pieces. I just had a meeting with her this last week just to give me a full walkthrough of everything, every piece, to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So we're already in planning for something in the spring, but that is
And she'll be
what we're
here
looking, and she'll be here.
in
we're
person
hoping.
with our staff when we do those days.
how my mind works? Obviously, we have a lot of good things here. Is there any feedback from cons of the program within the teachers, within the groups? Any issues that you might want to highlight?
I will tell you that the digital side of things is not as put together, as I said, as a Reveal was with McGraw-Hill,
Yeah.
or an Envisions is with a Pearson. They have everything so nicely laid out and so forth, where
This is a
Origo-
little bit more clunky.
Yes, it's not,
teachers
but
to
it's
kind of
not
navigate.
clunky that the stuff isn't there. It's just not as user-friendly. And it's funny because now, I literally just had a teacher yesterday say to me, I'm good with it now. And because it took them a little while. So now they are, familiar with it, they're good with it. But I said, this is the kind of thing, the company has been excellent about asking for feedback. In fact, I literally just got an email and said, could you please give us feedback? They constantly want that feedback to be changing things on their end.
Now, what about from a student standpoint, clunkiness, if we will?
Yeah.
Is like, how does that look? Is it pretty, I mean, obviously, we're looking at kindergarten, first grade, second grade, it's pretty easy to navigate
I
around.
don't
It's
think
much,
kids had any
no,
issues
it
with
wasn't
the
students that had the issue, because it's really set up, like if you were to open the student book, when they pull it up on their Chromebook or on their iPad, it looks almost identical.
Got it.
So it really wasn't, it wasn't the students that were having difficulty navigating, it was the teachers that were just, there's so many different resources that go along with these programs now, like it was just difficult to find them all.
Gotcha.
And then the other thing is this comes with a lot of manipulatives that the students really enjoy, different online games that were good for practice, and they seem to navigate them pretty well.
I don't want you to think this is antiquated, it certainly is not. It just wasn't packaged as this or whatever. It actually has lots of components that all the teachers as well as the students can get into and can explore. I actually just looked at the data piece, which is really nice. If our teachers use online assessments, the data that they can get for individual students as well as for their entire class, so they can see how their class does by each standard. They can see it how they do by each domain. They can click on one particular kid. What I love is they can actually click on that kid and they can see how they did on that one assessment, exactly which questions they got wrong or they got right, which sometimes on a digital piece you can't. So I don't want you to, it's there,
Right.
it just wasn't as, like I said, nicely packaged.
And all of that is going to be so instrumental in our IMTSS process as we're looking at, we have that universal screener, we really don't have some of the content-specific diagnostics that look at those specific skills. So that's going to be a huge benefit through that process as well.
In the research, any other districts are using this over McGraw-Hill or some of the other companies? you
So
mentioned?
we are one of the few districts that is starting with Origo. So in this area, we actually were asked to meet with their team and talk about some of the results that we've seen and how well our students and teachers liked it. So Christy's gonna be in like an Origo marketing thing.
Does she know that yet?
Yeah, she does.
No,
She does.
I do.
So in this area, they're actually an Australian company, but their US base is in Missouri. So there's a lot of districts down there that are using them. But we do know a number of districts that are actually in the field test process with Origo right now.
I recently was in a job like with other math curriculum leaders, And one of the questions was, what are people using, what are people field testing and piloting, and I mentioned that we just did this. And the company is Orgo, and it was interesting to me because I said to people, do you know this? And I was naming some resources that in our group, we all say, don't get rid of that, that's a good resource, you need to save that. And so we have these, so I named those resources, and they were like, yeah, we all have those. And I'm like, yeah, that's that company. And they were like, oh, okay. So it was one of those things, it's resources that we have all held on to because they were good quality resources, and they now have come out with a K-5 core program.
So what is the, probably last question here, what is the main reason for using this over McGraw-Hill or again, another company?
It was really down to the quotes from the teachers and the way that they thought that students reacted to it. One of the comments we had when we met with our team was, Reveal looks rigorous, but rigor doesn't mean more. And there was so much language on the page, it made it really difficult for some of our students that were struggling learners to access the math content, and kids were giving up as soon as they pulled their book out. They also were really impressed. Another comment that we heard was, Reveal looks like it's written by adults, the way they think kids learn, where Stepping Stones really does seem like it's written in the way that students learn. And I thought that both of those comments were really interesting because we've used a Reveal, we've used a McGraw product since 2015. We've used My Math and started out really enjoying it, and it became not as well liked over these last few years because it was difficult for some kids to access it. And so when we're looking at recovering from COVID and making sure that our students have a really strong foundation, we felt really confident that this was going to get our students there.
I swear, last question.
You said that 2 questions ago, Nick.
I'm assuming, it's probably a tough question, were our special education
Yes.
cued in and everything else perfect?
Yes, we did have a number of special educators that were included in this field test at all 3 buildings, and I've never had a situation where, as Christy said, when we used to pilot, like Christy would do her program for the year, I would do my program for the year, and we would come and duke it out because we both spent a lot of time and a lot of energy implementing our program. We had a unanimous decision, which was unheard of.
We haven't had kindergarten through 5th grade. Usually K1, 2 wants something, and 3, 4, 5 want something different. This is the first time we've had kindergarten through 5th grade. We're all in agreement, and as she said, unanimous. That's, as long as I've been here, that's not happened.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Anyone?
So I actually don't have any questions. Jen and I talked about this extensively today already. So my questions have been answered. I will just make one quick comment that you guys didn't discuss, and if I'm off on this, please feel free to correct me, but you talked very briefly about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
The cost on this, I believe, is $100,000. We're splitting into 2, 60 and 40,
It's 190.
190.
190,000. So I've entered, I negotiated with Orgo to split the payment into 2 years. So we're paying 60% of that cost
And then
in year
40.
1, and then we'll pay 40% of the cost in year 2.
And I think it's important to highlight that this cost is actually going to come out of our school choice money, which, recent history, we have not done what I like to do, and I've always said that it is supposed to be a non-operational budget item. This would actually fit into something that I would support using that. It is a one-time, twice payment. So just for anybody who's wondering about that.
Might be the first time you've said that.
This is
it is.
well, it's the first time we've done it in a long time.
I
So-
think it's important for everyone to know also that this is the cost is a 5-year license.
Yeah.
So you
Yes.
get all of the digital components for 5 years, as well as all of the consumable workbooks for 5 years.
Right.
And what they'll do is we'll place our order every July, they'll ship them out to us, so we don't have to have 5 years worth of books in a closet somewhere. They ship them to us annually. If our numbers fluctuate, all of a sudden we have a really big kindergarten class, but our 5th grade class is small, we can move those numbers around, so it's not an added cost year after year. And it's 5 years, I think, is the least amount of time you would want to implement something to see how it goes, using it with fidelity, our students improving, and all those things.
This requires a vote because it's a curriculum implementation, so we're supporting it. And when you have a lot of staff saying this is the way to go, I think that's something that we should definitely take into consideration. Because of the fidelity that they went through to get here, right? It's probably the cleanest process we've used most of the years that I've been here, so we're recommending it. It is
I'm not saying anything regulatory here, but math has been a weakness for this district, if I'm being honest. And quite honestly, I think this is probably overdue at this point, so.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the math program adoption as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the work.
Good job.
Is your maiden name Mrs. Hoopy?
Yes.
What?
Did you have Mrs. Hoopy?
Oh my goodness.
I think you were,
Did I have
Oh
you?
geez,
Yes.
here we go.
Jeez.
no, I don't think you had me. I
I
had Mrs.
had-
Chapman, but you
Yes,
guys came
that
in the
was
first
Mrs.
year.
Carline. It was our first, like,
Miss
remember?
Carl and I had her back in 97
Yeah.
grade 5.
Her daughter now is swimming at Bragg.
Yes.
Yes, she
Yes,
is.
yes.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
I saw her and I'm like,
She's a freshman.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
She's a freshman.
We all got married, you're right.
Yes, Mrs. Carline.
I believe it was Malia.
Was it Malia?
Yeah. I believe
Yeah,
it was.
she was with Allison.
All right.
That's what's going on. Okay, next item is the FY24 high-level budget overview.
You're gonna have to blow that one out.
It's like the link all
This is
over
the old
again.
link in the link school.
Right there.
Here's the
I think
budget,
it's
looks
that one,
good,
yeah.
okay, in case.
Yes, we
Sorry.
did it.
I'm
Try a
really
slim
poor at
fast.
this.
So, before Chris starts on the, kind of an overview, you have all of the information, you have 3 more pieces of information today, and I would ask you to consider sending questions about this, explanations directly to Christine, and then what we'll do is we'll put them into a Q&A and send it out to everybody before the next meeting. So that way, there's input from the school committee all along as we're trying to build it before we get to. House 1 is not yet out because the governor is a new governor, and usually when we have a new governor, it doesn't come out the 3rd week in January. It usually comes in February, even March. We're hearing March, but more than likely late February, just to let you know. And then I am meeting with the town manager, town accountant, myself, and Christine on the 14th next week to just kind of have general discussions about revenue and expenses and healthcare costs and all of that stuff.
have we gotten any percentage from the town yet, or?
No, nothing, no, it's,
That's not
it-
a while.
no one.
It's a while.
yeah, it's probably, because the way, so what we're hearing a lot is, there's a lot of discussions out there about what's going on in the world of budgets, and what we're generally hearing is the cliff, because of the federal money, and you'll see it in our budget proposal, right? I don't know if you've gone through it much yet, but as you get into it, you're gonna see the cliff. We're clearly, we're not the only district with the cliff, I guess is what I wanna say.
And that was-
Anything from the town? Don't,
We won't get it till after.
yeah,
our budget.
and whatever you hear originally, just wait, because it changes. It's not their fault, but it just changes drastically, so you gotta kind of wait through.
No, they were projecting next year to be the cliff, not this year, right?
Yeah, 24 and 25 have been the 2 years, and then 26 you start to see, quote, better years, but 24 and 25 are gonna be cliff years. I think for some districts it's 24, for some years it's 25. It all depends on how the federal assistance money and your costs. And we, as you know, well, let me rephrase that, you don't know yet. We have a perfect storm going on right now. And I'll get to it as soon as Christine is done in a few minutes, and I'll tell you what that is, okay?
Okay.
So this is the overview for the proposed first version of our FY24 budget. Just to show you, this was our ending operating budget for FY23. This is our new proposed number, which has an increase of 4.2 million, which is 12.6%. This is just a little breakout. The salaries and the expenses. You can see that. But also, just to give it broken up with the general education and the mandated education. Our big factor here is the sped out-of-district tuition, which right now we look like we have a projected 3.5 million in tuition. That does not include transportation. We're going to use, at this time, 1.6 million out of our operating budget and hoping to have a carryover of a little over 500,000. And then we will need 1.4 million in circuit breaker funds to cover. The next is,
I'm sorry, those numbers do not include any in this, right?
In terms of.
These numbers don't include any of the.
Yeah, they do. Some of
They do,
those are
okay.
already, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Before you go on to this,
Yep.
Trish, since we're on the special ed, on the form that you have right now, that I passed out, that is,
The multicolor one?
new students into Norton this fiscal year. The cost in the current budget, so you can see that when we had our $900,000 quote, that wasn't voted as an increase, it was taken from the school committee vote, I gotta make sure I say that the right way. We've had to really just zero out accounts in order to take care of that 475. And now when you take those 12 situations of private school collaborative, in district 1-to-1, the cost is now at $1.1 million. So you gotta change there of almost $700,000 for 12 students. Okay, and so added, not on this, but added to all of this other stuff in the main line is the letter that I had you folks be part of discussing, which is the increase of the 14% to private school tuitions, which hits us for another $230,000. So all in between just this line item, this tuition is pushing $1 million for out of district. Go ahead, Chris.
If we want to stick with the special education, should we?
Yeah.
So this is what we're currently adding in FY23. And then as, this is the 1.1. We also have this projection for, oh boy, this is small.
You have it in the
We have it
Yeah, right there.
It's a small print, sorry, just the way it prints.
Sorry about that. This is FY23, 24, and 25. And this, this encompasses everything. You'll see the transportation also includes one-to-ones or other services that they need, for example, therapies.
And I think it's really, really important as you take a look at this to see the jump in transportation. You see it in the other sheet of the new residents, and now you see it on this sheet. We'll get some circuit breaker money at some point. We just don't know what that's going to look like, and as you know, that's a factor that will come in later.
Now, when we look at these special ed costs, those are essentially our fixed costs that we can't manipulate in any way, shape, or
Right, so
form.
the formula is, you take this, we can actually, let's use let's say a student is out of district $50,000. We'll just use that. The first 40 you automatically own. And then you can get 70% of the remaining 10, or in this case, 7 out of 10,000 will come back to that circuit breaker process if the circuit breaker is set at 70%. There is a bill that's been filed, supported by your association, my association, the teachers, everybody's on board that this should move to 90%. It should be a 90% reimbursement. It shouldn't be 70%. It's a huge, I mean, that increase of either 20 or 15% to 90 that's a huge number for us in Norton.
So with these 12 cases, I assume they're varying ages and no one's getting to the point where
Correct.
they're gonna age out.
These are
So
long-term,
they're with us for a while.
these are long-term factors. And again, students, the churn is constantly happening, right? It happens in all levels, at all grade levels. You could have a parent that's with us right now who is leaving us at the end of this year and is going to Attleboro or the reverse. if you remember, and I think, well, four of you were on, Gene Sullivan was still here at the time, not Vinny as the PPS director. We had a situation of 8 students, if you remember, which ended up costing us, was almost $800,000, and then through the other savings and special ed, it became $500,000. But the same idea that's happening with these cases before you.
Can I ask a random question? Why is this broken up into 3 groups?
In terms of,
You have
It's
the-
3 years. Oh, sorry. I didn't say that.
Oh,
Yeah, no, not this way, this way. There's,
The top is
oh,
other state schools or therapies. The next is collaborative, and the
all
bottom
right, so it's
is
just
private.
the type of facility we're sending them to. Okay.
All right, so on this sheet, move-in special, so that's kids coming to our school.
yeah, this is a person who rents or purchases a house in the town.
Got it. So we're paying right now, transportation-wise, nearly 50,000, 39,000 for someone to drive to Norton schools? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we would have picked up that $49,350 on that second one that goes to a private school who moved in from an out-of-state. The
Got it.
following year, you'll see that same student, we picked them up for the entire year now,
Got it.
and it's 108.
This-
And in most cases, this is probably, with everything else that we do, you guys do, these are the things that cause us the most strain, stress, in terms of what to do with the budget. And so we're being as conservative as we can, but I can't predict 12. I can't predict 8. I mean, we usually carry over, we try to protect one $100,000 placement in our budgets through the years. That's what we try to do. And as you can see by this is going to a whole nother level.
It's just, I guess my point here is I mean, this is probably just broken law somewhere along the lines, but we're potentially next year paying $108,000 for a student to come from out of state to come into our district. Is there any possibility that if we reached out to those parents and told them we'd give them $20,000 to get their kid here?
Yeah, so the issue is.
Wait, I think- no, it's the other
No,
way around.
you're misunderstanding what's happening. They're moving into Norton.
They came from another state into
Yeah.
Norton already. And now they're going
We're
to
gonna-
the same, to a private school in
Spend $108,000 to
Massachusetts.
send them to their school, which is wherever it is.
Correct, but we're gonna be on the hook for $108,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is typically
So if we
heavy
said to
medical
them-
situation, where going into their parents' car is not gonna work.
So it could be like for example, like a wheelchair car or something like that.
Yeah, it could be.
But how did they get, no, I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming the parent has to bring them to some type of activities and blah, blah,
Those are
blah.
all, in many cases, I'll defer to Vinnie, but in many cases, those are done through third parties and done through insurance.
I think, Jen, back to your point, it's like we could pay someone to
Buy them a car.
buy them a car and then send them their way.
It's very, very, very medically fragile situations that, now, I will tell you, Nick, to your point, I think, in many ways, this wasn't that type of a number just 5-6 years ago.
Mhm.
This is definitely a huge, we have students right now where all of a sudden we have to find a driving situation. It's part of the IEP, that's fine, but there's been a significant change for whatever reason. We're being asked $275 for a 30-minute drop-off and pickup AM and PM. $275.
Do we have any ability legally to find a driver for that person or people?
In terms of,
Could we hire in Joe Schmo off the road who has the ability to bring that person somewhere?
well, most of this is actually companies that we go after, and they have drivers. So it's not, in other words, let's just say, only X company and Y company have that specialty transportation vehicle.
Mhm.
That's where we go. And in many cases, it's because of the medical. In some cases, we have traveling nurses with the students on the transportation. So that's the biggest issue here is the cost. And we can give you, on this sheet, the one that's hard to see, maybe we'll blow this up and put it into a bigger piece of paper so it's easier to see. You'll see some of the jumps. If we could go back to FY like 21, 22, you'll see what I mean by the huge changes in transportation. We were very lucky with our vendors, to be quite honest, that we even have buses, because That's the other problem. That's the big civil rights violation, is if we can't get them there.
Yeah.
Because now we're gonna have to go backwards and pick up the lost educational time for the bus or van to not be able to show up.
And like, I mean, this is crazy too, but like, what happens if we get another 5?
I'm sorry?
What happens if we get another 5 students? Are we
Yeah.
have to do the same thing?
Yeah.
It's happened.
Yeah.
It's happened.
You're starting to get the problem now.
Nick, Nick, to your question, we've had years where it's been 2 and 3 left, and the money kind of evens itself out. We've had years where we've had, especially back to Norton High, a student who's been out of district since 1st and 2nd grade, really wants to go to Norton High. We put all, we'll hire, it's easier it's less money for us to hire someone who's our own, even if we're putting the cost of the town for healthcare, than it is to, because then in some cases, parents will say, I can pick them up and drop them off, right? Because they're not medically fragile, let's say, and all that stuff. And then every month we pay them the going rate, which is something cents, whatever it is, 55, 60 cents per mile, and they come in and they're saving us thousands upon thousands of dollars by cutting them that check.
And this is probably gonna open a can of worms, I don't want to open a can of worms. How do we get away with needing to obviously get transportation for these kids, but yet if a parent in district with a able-bodied child, we don't have to bus them?
Well, in terms of general ed, you have the minimum mileage requirement. In terms of the transportation of a special ed student, it's going to be based upon the IEP team decision, which is the parent and the district based on the need of the student.
So I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a second. So we are legally bound to pay these costs. And I've been saying for years, the problem is we have a budget that looks at, okay, here's what the schools get. And typically years, 2.5%, maybe
Yeah.
2.3%. So these numbers can jump up so much that it's very feasible that if you look at our general education versus our special education, we're actually putting a big cut to the general education. It looks like, oh, no, the school's got 1.3 million, but, well, we're legally bound to pay for these 12 kids coming in, and there's not much you can do. You really can't, because if they sue you, they're gonna win. That's it. There's no gray area there. So in the end, we end up cutting general education, even though it looks like, oh, they've gotten a nice bump. No, we haven't. And it's been going on for a long time. Every once in a while, like Dr. Bennett said, we get lucky and it evens out, or maybe it goes in favor. Generally speaking, that hasn't been the case, quite honestly.
And I
So-
think a few years ago, Dinesh, to your point, I think the reason why we started to use the word mandate was to differentiate that we don't have an option.
Right.
So these are just mandated fixed costs based on sort of law and requirement,
Yeah.
and unfortunately,
And it's been brought up a number of times that, by us and by many people actually, that there's a question about whether or not this should actually be a school budget item or it should be a medical insurance item. In some of these cases, transportation for somebody who's medically fragile, I'd make the argument, it really should be a medical issue, right? It should be medical
Medical
insurance.
transport.
Zero chance they're gonna get that passed. It's just not. But the law is very clear on it, and unfortunately, the schools have the least power, if you will, to change that. So now you're in the weeds with us.
But, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Nice to have company.
If I could just ask Mr.
Yep.
Cersey to just,
So, I mean, I think what, as you were saying, Dennis, so there are requirements here, and we have to honor those IEPs when they come in. So, there is something called localization, so we'll work with parents and some of these parents to look at what programs do we have. So sometimes when you have students coming from out of state, to be honest, they don't have the same level of programming we do, and I know over the years, in the short time that I've been here, we've developed a number of specialized programs in special education, because in the long run, it saves, well, I think,
Cheaper
more
for us.
importantly than anything else, they're here in their neighborhoods, right? They're with their peers, they're able to interact. Now, there are some certain cases where, for example, a very medically fragile student, we're not gonna be able to have that kind of program. But for a lot of other programs, we're definitely seeing that as we develop the programs, we're able to bring more kids back to their neighborhood schools, which is most important. But we're also, in reality, saving some money that can go back to general ed. But even within in our own district, those programs aren't
not cheap. It requires a high level of specialized staff, sometimes larger numbers of staff. But over the years, we've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of students we have to send out because we've created the programs and been able to bring in the specialized staff to manage those students, provide them with the education that we're able to do here in their home schools. So there are some things that we can do, but 12 move-ins, yeah, no, you know, that was not anything we could kind of predict. And those are the kids that are out of district or needing one-to-ones. We've also had a huge number of students move in that just require this programming that I've talked about, the specialized programs that I've talked about, which now pushes the numbers in those programs. So we have to make sure we have additional staff, or we create programs as they move up from, you know, the elementary up to the high school. So those things keep kind of evolving. But
Never about a district.
No.
This is just what's moved in since we
Yeah.
Yeah, so
since
we
did
started,
our budget last year.
correct, so we budgeted last year was either 33,
35, I think.
35, so you can see where the number now jumps that total above the number that we haven't had here in a while. We've been pretty stuck in that middle 30 number for quite a while.
And because we have some of these programs, we've actually brought some students back
Right.
to district with their, you know, with their parents. We've worked with their parents, their outside providers, and with our staff here in the buildings to bring some students back to district, or those numbers would be even higher.
There probably isn't a day that Vinny doesn't swing by my office where the conversation is great news, and Thursday it's forget the great news. Right, it's just because of, you know, this, and again, we don't have that control. There's been a lot of push to try to get the state formula to change around this. One of the examples has been specifically to tuition, that if you hit a certain tuition number, that should come out of the state coffers, right? It shouldn't be put on a single community. It is a state community responsibility to make sure these children are getting what they need. But that doesn't have any landing on it, if you will. So,
And we have no control over those tuition numbers, like whatever they charge, that's what we pay.
that's correct. So the two collaboratives we belong to are Reed's tuition increase is 5.2%, and FICO is 10% as of this morning. I was at the board meeting. So not huge increases, but you're talking about if it's 50,000, it's another 5. If it's 60, it's another 6. So you're seeing those, and then the added on issue of transporting the child, which, you know, we have our own minibuses as well, and there's an expense there. You know, the going rate for van drivers and bus drivers is through the roof in terms of competition. We've been incredibly lucky that our people have stayed with us. While, you know, there's a local school system superintendent told me he currently has 20 paraprofessional positions still open, has not been able to fill them. So that means there's a lot of running around taking place by 1 or 2 people in order to meet the requirement that those students need. So, next item, more good news. Yeah.
So the next is using our school choice funds. So we level funded our budget with the exception of the COLA and the mandated education and transportation. So we took the amount of money that we used in school choice funds last year and we level funded them, which with a few items that we added that were in grants that are no longer used, like ESSER. And we now are using 1.6 million of the school choice funds just to level off our budget. We're hoping to have around 950,000 left that we can help use, and then we will need 660 just to maintain the level funded budget. So we're hoping that we will get 1.4 more in school choice funds, which then we'll be able to use around 700,000, and we are saving some funds in ESSER 3, which is the final year, to offset the overall budget to closer to 36.4 million.
That's the last of the ESSER 3 money.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is talk about some more money coming and an increase to grants. It'll be interesting to see if it happens, especially now that there's a discussion on the, what's it called? Not the Ds and the Rs are fighting about paying the bills, what's that called? I can't remember, just reading it the other day. So
Debt ceiling.
Debt ceiling, thank you. So that could really stop the grants, because that could be the fiscal conservatives, rightfully so, we're gonna say we can't do this anymore. So.
And can I ask, Christina, and to your point, and as the 1.6 million that you're taking out of school choice to level the budget is potentially not what you would want the school choice money to be used for, correct?
Not
So-
potential, there's no potential.
Yeah. Just was
Well,
making sure
Well,
that,
That's supposed to be for.
we-
I mean, that is not what
You'll-
the school choice money.
You'll have
ever
some
was.
outlines about where the school choice money is going, coming next. One of our thoughts is to do that. And the 1.44, the FY '24, that's to be determined. That comes out with House 1. We'll know right away what that number is with
Right.
the Department of Revenue. So it brings it down a little bit, I guess.
And for school choice, what do we get per student?
So right now, we're getting well over $6,000. It's based on a formula that sets it at 5, but because you might have a student who has OT or PT or speech, we get more money for that. So we're averaging about $6,300 a student, on average. There's a lot of 5s there, and then some kids are 8, and, depending on the service delivery
And
and
how
all
many
that stuff.
kids are in that program?
We have 215, I believe, right now, 215 students. You'll get a school choice report from me as part of your budget stuff.
And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but one of the things about school choice, obviously it gives us additional money in the budget. However, how much are we paying per pupil on average to educate a kid for 1 year in Norton?
All in, healthcare, transportation, because it's based upon the teachers' salaries and all that, it's probably running right around 16.
So, I guess, what is the pro of school choice if we have to make up $10,000 per kid?
May I?
Sure.
So, 16,000 is what it costs to educate a child. However, there's a difference between the fixed and the variable costs. So, on any given day, the lights are on in the school, the teacher that stands in front of the classroom is paid, the heat is paid for, the electricity is paid for, et cetera. So, if you think about it that way, if I have a class of, say, 19 kids, and I have capacity for 25, if I bring 6 more kids in, I actually am not incurring any fixed costs. All those fixed costs are already on the books. So it's a question of what are your variable costs. And I would make the argument at that point, your variable costs are pretty close to 0. There may be maybe a food cost, and for lunch, I don't know how lunch works out, like if there's a cost to us or not, et cetera. If they play sports, there's probably a small cost. I mean, under $100, maybe low double
Well,
digits.
they would pay a fee like any other.
Yeah, but we don't cover the cost of the sports with that. So
No, we don't cover the cost for
So
anybody.
it's just full disclosure, there's probably some small cost there, but the long and short of it is the 5,000 is almost pure profit for us, to be honest with you.
Yes and no, though, because if you have 215 extra kids in school, at, let's call it 20 per class.
But we
that's
spread
an
them out
extra.
over all the classes, all the
But if we just
grades.
spread out our own kids over all the classes, we would be able to cut down from teachers, correct? Because that's 10 teacher salaries.
In some grades, you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, that's not true across the board. So, and if you think about a class of 20 kids at 5,000, it's $100,000. You're actually still probably making out of that. I mean, not probably, you are making out of that, knowing the cost of the teacher.
You wouldn't likely be able to close a classroom.
Yeah.
Because they're so spread out. Like, you don't have, so say it's 220, that might be, 17-ish kids in each school, for example, but they're not all in the same grade. So you wouldn't have enough school choice kids coming into 3rd grade to take a teacher out and lower, and still take those, because,
Yeah, but if they're loaded up and there's more in 3rd grade than in 2nd grade, you might be able to remove the 2nd grade teacher and put that teacher in the 3rd grade, correct?
no, because there's not enough, we have limits on the amount we allow per grade, and it's not enough to have a whole classroom of school choice kids come in.
In most cases,
What's our
the.
cap of school choice kids?
I'm sorry?
Do we have a cap, or we just?
Yeah, we've had caps by grade that the school committee has voted, based on the enrollment of the, so the other thing we don't want to do, to your point, Nick, in some ways, is we don't want to take a classroom that's 20 and make it 29.
Right.
We don't want to go the opposite either. I think the biggest issue about school choice, and the reason why we started it 7, 8 years ago now, is Norton had a one-way street. Get out of here. Charter school was packed, private school numbers were through the roof, voc school numbers were through the roof, the Aggie number. Nobody was taking the perspective of, it's a good school system, why don't we get into the competitive market? Last night, North Attleboro is now a full school choice district. They were only high school. They filled 9 out of 40 in the high school this past year. They're
Attleboro
now-
stopped, huh?
I'm sorry?
Attleboro stopped.
Yes, they stop as part of, I think they're stopping for a while based upon they have growth that goes with a brand-new
High school.
high school. So typically when you do that.
Mansfield was. high
And
school.
Mansfield is high school.
9th and 10th only.
Yeah, 9th and 10th. So it became more of a competitive situation, which for us also led to probably the biggest change for us, which was everything to do with technology, curriculum. If you look at the literacy that was purchased or the math that was purchased a number of years ago, 100% of it came out of school choice. I'm trying to think of what else.
And I would make the argument, if tomorrow, every school choice kid said, I'm no longer going here, it would be actually devastating for them. It would absolutely kill us. So, that is I lay awake at night worried that school choice kids will all say, I found a better school.
So I think one of the things that comes into play is the number one thing around school choice is parents want competition. There's no doubt that's different from when I went to school. The parents of today's kids, they want to take a look at choosing the school that they want to send their kids to. And we see that with the parents that come into the school choice program here. And it's not perfect. I mean, let's be honest, it's not perfect in any way, shape, or form. The issue for us has been, when we originally started this, the idea was that we were going to go after the main line items of technology and all of that stuff, curriculum purchases. It was all that, we can buy this, we pay for it, and then there's nothing to pay for the next 5 years because we're using those funds. So when we look at the pandemic, for example, and we shut down on March 13th, we were one of the districts that could start opening up right away. The only thing we had to do was get those technology pieces home to the kids in some of the younger grades, while other districts waited until the fall before they got this, as one example of it. You will be having some difficult conversations coming up about school choice, because if the budget is bad and I'm cutting a ton of positions and increasing class sizes, you may have to have a hard conversation that you will not accept X number of students into that grade at all, because they're already at 25, 26, 27. So then you have the other curveball, and that is, will you have to have a fundamental discussion, which I wouldn't support, but if the budget is bad, you're gonna have to talk about it, and that is your middle school model, where you have the hardest cut in enrollment as a district, because that low group is going through in the next few years. So, and it's the building with the most school choice kids in general, in
It's
6th,
also
7th, and
because
8th.
of the model, though, it's tough to,
You
we
can't-
have the
Correct.
two sides, whatever, 6
Correct.
classes, each
Can't
one
do
is a
it.
different subject, up 3 verticals. You can't cut the history teacher, because now who teaches history?
Right.
You had that discussion at Norton a number of years ago before I got here.
Yeah.
You wanted to cut the entire history department at the middle school.
It was a non-MCAS.
It was-
It was a
It was
non-MCAS.
non-MCAS testing area,
That's definitely
so.
before my time.
It is,
Yeah,
but it
I
happened.
don't remember that at all.
But it did
It
happen.
was.
I've been here for like 17 years.
Yeah, and it's not that I like school choice and the things about school choice. The problem is the money's not following the kids. We're getting a quarter of it, or a third of it.
It's been the same number since the 1990s when it was implemented.
This is the problem.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to make the argument that we should be getting more than 5, I 100% agree with you on
Well,
that.
no, but we should absolutely.
Ask-
But again, that's bigger than
ask
us.
Joe.
So
Ask Joe what we pay for the charter schools.
Yeah. So added to that
What do we pay for
is-
charter school, Joe?
is, in terms of
Tuition?
tuition,
Yeah.
it's literally a few bucks less than our total tuition. That's how it's based.
It's like
That went up.
14,000.
That's what I'm
Right,
saying.
right.
So,
If they get 14,000, we get 5.
correct, but if we get a kid from Mansfield that wants to come to Norton, that's great. Mansfield's still paying that kid's 16, 18, whatever they're paying over there.
No, they.
No, I know, but tax dollar wise, that
Yeah,
school's losing
yeah,
no money.
that's- Yeah.
Yes.
So instead of funding the system, they would be funding the student. Student goes to Norton, you get us $15,000 or $16,000, because that's how much it costs to educate your child here.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying we want to ship people out of Norton.
No, I don't, no, I'm saying the money of whatever the district
Yeah,
has.
that's sustainable for a couple of years, and then they say, you don't need that much money anymore, they cut your budget. That's what they'll do. Like, I get what you're saying. So Mansfield still gets their $16,000 that they would have gotten if the kid was there, even though he's not there. Well, eventually the town looks and says, yeah, we're not gonna budget you to that. And it's a slow bleed, right? Like, this year you get 2.3%. Next year you get 2.3% too, but guess what? 2.3% is notionally less now because, you're starting to bleed out. So it's, I get what you're saying. The school choice is a profitable thing for us. And I hate to say that way because education shouldn't be about profit, but it's a budget positive thing for us.
It should be more, but yes.
I don't disagree with you.
Good.
If we were sending a bunch of kids out, I would disagree vehemently, but because we're
But if
getting
we were
so many kids.
sending a bunch of kids out, we need to do a better job as a district to have our school better.
Right, I'm being somewhat
So
facetious.
that's
I'm saying because we're taking them
that-
in, I want the money.
So that's a really good discussion, because in 2013, when I got here, 223 kids were going to the charter school. It's now under 80, right? And declining every year, coming back to Norton High predominantly. When you look at the VOC, you're gonna see the biggest growth in VOC education in the next 10 years. The economy, the coming out of COVID, the learning style of what happens in a VOC and an Aggie, the numbers are gonna go through the roof. Because that's where, take a look at even this.
Are they getting sued right now?
They're getting sued for not allowing,
Not allowing enough
well,
kids?
it's that whole special education type of learner student. So there's a civil lawsuit that's taking place.
Sorry, we're a little off topic.
No, that's fine.
It's on topic, it's part of what we're talking about.
We go through it every year.
Yeah, this is not new for us.
The next form that you have that's up there is, that's just a salary summary, but we also gave you all the FTEs. I want to thank Chris for that, because we've never, Christine, this is the first time you've ever seen it this way. It just gives you all the FTEs that you have in every school, so you can say, why do we have X number of teachers, 37.7 at the JCS, but only 24.6 general ed. Well, we all know why. It's the size and so on and so forth. And it breaks down all the way down to about, all together with grants, revolving, operating, we have about 413 employees that have direct services in these two line items. And
Effort every year.
and custodian and all that stuff. And then,
So,
Yes, it's the same thing, but for just the grants, just to show you how many FTEs we have coming out of each grant and the uses. These are the grants that we typically receive every year. And this is just based off of FY23 numbers.
so 26.64 people who work for the district. In most cases, these are staff connected to the classroom, are paid for through this process.
Could you say that one more time, sorry?
So the 26.64 total FTE
Got it.
on that page
Yep, yep.
is all grant-funded positions.
and
So,
we don't know if those are gonna continue.
so right now, the federal grants look very positive for the first time in a long time. It looks like 5%, 10%, 8% increases somewhere in there. We don't have that number yet, but we're working off that.
Projected.
Yeah, we're projected that we,
To increase.
if we have people in here, we should be able to make up a good chunk of the increase without having to go into the operating budget as a huge number. And then everybody's favorite,
Revolving?
revolving. And there's facilities and preschool here.
Which we added an FTE in the preschool and a little bit in the facilities as well for FY24.
And preschool is, I don't wanna say self-funded, but they generate a lot of their own, call it revenue, but it's
Yeah,
their expenses.
They used to, because what's happening is the salaries are on this side, rightfully so. And we have plenty of kids, believe me, we already had waiting lists that are starting for next year. It's very popular. And parents are paying, you're gonna have a recommendation on an increase, by the way. But that number is starting to widen into a pretty significant six-figure number in terms of the difference.
And preschool does not allow for school choice.
Correct.
Now, is that a state
Why not?
statute?
State statute. Massachusetts really, except for special education, does not recognize preschool. If you think about it, we call it the formula and the way that it's done. You have the enrollment there, but you're not getting, quote, money for that unless you get one of their grants, which most of the suburbs like us don't get. They're in the city. Now, there is a move, to your point, Nick, there is a move to say the state should be paying X number of dollars for these part-time. So if it's $10,000 per the state formula, we should be getting $4,600, $5,000 per of those students. That's a game changer for us, right? That's a game changer for us.
So because preschool isn't, I don't want to say recognized, that's not the right word, but.
It's not mandated except for special education services, and then the model is to utilize other students as part of the learning process.
So in theory, if a model student from Attleboro wants to come in, they
No.
could or could not?
Cannot.
Okay. Okay.
Same thing with out of state. We've had professors at Wheaton who have wanted to bring their students here. They can't come in their school of choice. The only thing we could do is treat them like international students and say, we're gonna charge you $10,000 to come to Norton schools. And that's not something really of interest.
Are we looking at?
Based on daycare, it might be.
Yeah, well, that's the other big issue right now, is the daycare issue. That's just,
Okay, so I have two questions.
Yep.
One, you just touched on it. Are we looking at bringing back the international student program?
we
Or are we still
had,
maybe a year or two away?
we have not discussed this, but yes, we have had a discussion with one of the companies, last week, I think.
Okay.
Nothing for this coming year, just laying down the groundwork for, are we looking at 25? Because first of all, you need a year out. There's also a lot of implications that go with this, as we know, right? So we're in talks, but nothing that's formalized in any way.
So my second question, and I don't know if this is a tough one or if we even have the answer right away. What is our level service budget look like? Like to keep the lights on, keep everything out?
You're looking at it. There's your cliff. So we'll be coming back to you by cutting a bunch of stuff. And the positions, just to let you know, those positions, only the first two are in the budget right now. So those other sped positions that are there, those aren't even in the budget yet. I've got to cut somewhere else to put those in right now. I don't have a choice because, and the ELL teacher, those would be the three. But I wanted you to see the recommendations that came from our building principals, from our coordinators, directors, so that you could see what that means as a total, and as a total cost of the district. I don't see adding $936,000 of new staffing.
Now, and this is the only school without a library.
Yes,
anything.
yeah, this is the biggest issue in this building right now in terms of the need for staff. It would be a librarian, either part-time or full-time. If the budget comes in anything reasonable, and then we save over the summer on positions, I would probably finally prioritize it.
How much do we use from school choice for operational for this year?
I'd have to defer. How much do we use as operational in school choice this year, do you know?
I can look into
For
the
this,
exact
for you mean this
figures,
current
but-
budget?
The current
Yeah.
year?
Yeah, the one we're in now, not.
It wasn't as much
not this
as,
budget.
it wasn't as much as originally anticipated,
It
we know that.
It was budgeted for around close to 1.5, and we've used less than that.
Okay.
And
We can
then
get
the
you a
reason-
breakdown of that.
I just was curious, because I'm looking at the 1.6. I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, all right, 12.6% to keep the lights on. Seems super high, to be honest with you. And I was trying to think, like, do we use,
Well, you have positions and grants and all of that that are one-time only that you may have to shift to other areas of the budget.
yeah,
I don't want to start talking positions, but, because it's too early to do that and get everybody, all of my staff upset about do they have a job.
yeah.
But we are going to have difficult conversations.
Right. Yeah, don't give me a breakdown of where we used it in operational. It's because it's just gonna upset me, so. It's gonna
So,
make every year more
so,
consistent.
and then you have the line item budget, right, that's there. So we wanted to give you all of this, and the idea is that you guys have the next 2 weeks of homework to ask away questions, public record, of course, so don't have any debate. But if, send it to Christine, and Christine will then just email it to all of you, so it's just public record, anybody can have it, you can talk about it with anybody that you want, it's all of that stuff. And in that way, maybe we come up with some creative, crazy ideas to try to make this look happier, I guess, and go from there. And then by then, I should have some numbers from the state and in general from the town as well.
So when we look at this budget, we haven't touched fees, we haven't done anything with any
Yeah,
of that.
that'll be part of the bigger discussions will be the fees,
And-
what do we cut?
Can we project what we're gonna gain from field rentals?
We can project it, right, we did have our first rental, by the way. Somebody came in for 4 hours at $175 an hour and basically just said, I want this every day. So we're in talks with those groups already, but we're also working our schedule. We really want to balance, we want to make money, of course, and that's great, but we have our high school sports, we also have our community sports that we want to give them as much as we can, while at the same time still be able to, we should make some decent money this summer off of it, to be quite honest. So, and by decent, I couldn't even try to project, but you know, if you're, you could make a good 40, 50, 60,000 just as a startup this summer, depending on the organizations, and still have our community groups use it.
And that money isn't necessarily earmarked for anything specific per se.
That's a facility, right?
It's a
So
facility.
it goes into facility revolving account, so it could, you know, we don't want to do it this way, but if you're in dire straits, it could absorb something else that's in the operational budget. That goal is to build that line item for the field, so that long-term, there's less implications to the operating budget. So that should be a goal we maintain for the first 2 or 3 years.
And I think the goal always was to try to reduce some of our fees
Yes.
with that
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
So as I'm sitting here thinking more about Nick's comments, I wonder if it does make some sense to look and see if there is an inflection point on those numbers, grade by grade. The school-
That's
the
easy
school
for us to
choice
do.
numbers.
Yeah, easy to do. We have it in a graph already, and then we
Yeah.
can break it down on how many it impacts per
Right,
grade.
because even though, I mean, it's pure profit, he's not wrong that there does come an inflection point where, okay, we're actually adding a teacher, we wanna make sure that we're not doing that, I don't think we are.
I know that we're not. but-
Yeah, I don't think we are, I
but-
think we have more capacity, to be honest with you, but it's worth doing the study and kind of knowing at least what the bogey is, where
Yep.
the end game is.
Look at the break-even point.
Yeah,
Yeah, and again, taking into account, elementary is gonna look different from middle school, gonna look different from high school.
right,
Because high
right.
school is course-driven, transcript-driven, middle school is driven by the middle school
Right.
philosophy,
Which-
elementary is totally
I
different.
100% get, but we should still know the marginal utility for each school, like where do we start losing value, you know? So, okay.
Okay. All right, next item is the student absence data.
So, just, you folks had asked for me to give you some data points, so,
You want the PowerPoint?
no, I don't need it, it's fine.
But she's gonna attack you.
Yeah. She's been running ragged doing reports for me the last 2 weeks, so I.
Might want to.
I had said to the committee that I'd come back and provide you some updates on some student attendance stuff. So I did it in a student attendance report for the district, starting on the 6th of September, running through the 11th of January. So as you look at it, 82 days of school, okay? And we've reviewed unexcused absences of 10 or plus days. So this doesn't include any notation of medical note, any notation of, and it's just the student was unexcused. And then we have 140 current students as of that timeline at 10 plus unexcused, which is pretty significant. The breakdown, as you can see, is the highest at the JCS, then the middle school, then the LG, then the Hague, then the high school. Again, high schools, you're building transcripts, you got, preparation for your career, for college, for entering the workforce. It's a little different. And then we broke it down at the JCS. I actually broke it down by grade levels as well. Some of this, I will be very upfront, some of this has to do with students who have some of their own learning challenges about coming to school. I myself have observed this recently, where the student doesn't want to be in school, doesn't want to leave their parent and all that, it's part of that. So we work with families with that, but then we need to at least try to get to the front door of the school before we just say, no, we're not coming to school. And of course, the biggest concern that I have is what does this really mean in terms of the hours missed of school, right? So if you think about it, we have a student with 10 unexcused absences has missed 65 hours of time on learning, or as of the time of the year, 12% of the year already. 15 days, that's 97 and a half hours. 42 students have a range of 16 to 61 days. 19 students have 20 plus days, as you see in the data. So what are we gonna do about it? So that becomes the next big thing. So we follow all the regulations in terms, after X number of days, we send letters home and all that stuff. But we wanna start what the research shows, and I had to do some research readings and stuff. And what we found is, number one, our IMTSS long-term is gonna benefit us, right? Because we're gonna try to be working with parents right up front and not wait for any type of days, right? We wanna get on top of that because of the teaching and learning component. The second part is having those building level discussions with families, right? Not a phone call, but a one-to-one meet. Some school districts, the principals with someone else is going out to the home, okay? Nudge letters, kind of like, hey, here's the law, you have to come or else. And unfortunately, if you're not coming, then I have a right, or I have a responsibility to file with the courts, and or even DCF, which then becomes a whole nightmare that families really don't want to deal with unless they're getting some positives of it. And then at my level, I deal with any student that's on the list that is a school choice problem. That discussion is coming from me, because my discussion with families that are school choice all the time is, A, school choice is in many ways a privilege that many communities don't have, and B, I need you to come to school, and the hardest thing about coming to school and school choice is you gotta get here on your own. You know, so we are always having those discussions, and we've had students leave us because of those discussions, and that's taking place on a regular basis. Not on your list up there, but you've heard me talk about a school truancy officer, somebody who does knock on the door on a regular basis, does watch to make sure that students are getting on the bus. It's not a full-time job or anything. I'm gonna file for a grant to see if I can get it through that. There are some grants out there under this whole, you know, students coming to school and rigor and, you know, being involved in the mindset and all that stuff, so we'll do that. Or we'll eventually play it into the budget if we can, recognizing that if the budget is in any way decent, maybe we do take a chance and spend $25,000 out of school choice to try to see if we can get those kids into school on a regular basis. A lot of school systems now are utilizing this parent liaison position for some of this, so it's not a hard knock of you're not parenting, you need to bring your kid to school. It's more of how can I help you get your kid to school? It's a different approach. So there are many school districts that are going in that direction. I'll keep you posted on what these numbers look like at another time this year if you would like me to do so.
I have two questions. One, how long does it go before the courts and DCF get involved? Like, do we have like a magic number, or is it, like if we're going out there, we're sending letters,
Yeah,
we're not
15
hearing
consecutive
back?
days gives us some authority, if you will, as a district. But that's 3 weeks of missing school.
Yeah.
So we start a lot earlier than that as a district. Norton Public School starts a lot earlier than that as a district. So that's number one. Number two, there really isn't a whole lot coming out of the courts. As I think Vinnie can attest, a number of years ago, right before COVID, they changed the law because if you remember, parents would be fined, for example, $25 a day or something like, and those much smarter than me believed that wasn't working. We actually thought it was working to a certain extent, especially when the judges were being, you know, really holding the parents accountable to getting their kids in school on a regular basis. I think not necessarily as much in Norton, but a lot of issues in the larger cities around poverty and homelessness and all that stuff has led to these changes in some of the regulations. It is not a Norton problem. I can assure you, as somebody who sits with colleagues, one of my first questions I always say is, how's your discipline and how's attendance? And I always do two-part attendance, student attendance and adult attendance. Right? And we're all facing the same situation when it comes to that.
Does this correlate, probably not as drastic, but does it correlate to the teachers as well? In terms of, have we seen an increase on teacher absences?
Oh, the pandemic absolutely increased it. Yeah. It's not unusual, Nick, for us to see on a regular basis, I'm gonna use the word staff, I'm not gonna use the word teachers because I don't have that specific number, but our employees, it's not unusual for us to see 40 a day. And for many reasons. Child is sick, we have a growing population of staff with elderly parents, and that's becoming more of an issue. Surgeries, and that, I shouldn't include surgeries and or like maternal and paternal leave, but those are there too. And then backfilling it. because remember, in most cases, you're paying that daily rate for the employee, and you're paying another rate for the substitute to cover.
Any other questions on that?
I mean, more of a thought than a question, it's just like, I don't know, as probably everybody doesn't know what to do. Clearly, it's a problem. We probably gotta really think about it, but ultimately, I think it does come right back down to the parents. You've gotta get your kids to school.
We don't know much about it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if doing.
much we can do, right?
Correct, yeah.
The-
And maybe we do get creative and try to figure out, what is maybe a solution that works, test it out, see what happens, but I just don't know, if your kid's missing 15, 19, 20 days of school already in 80 days, I mean, what are we
Yeah,
doing?
The biggest issue that happens, and again, people that are much more in tune to this than I am, but it really is about that, whatever that makeup of the family is to get the kid to school. And I think the other thing is, in some cases, education levels and everything else of, it's so important to get to school, especially, I think K-3 are some of the most important years in a child for a number of different reasons, right? We all know this as, in these roles. I do think it's really important to recognize that where we see the uptick in these situations, a lot of it has to do with behavioral issues and a struggle around how to get my child to school because it's so difficult to get them to school. So it's not parenting, it's that whole role of how do I take my child who doesn't want to go. And I can tell you, this year more than any other year, I've just been popping into the schools early in the morning. The LGN is on my way, so I usually try to pop in the morning as they're coming in, and I'm sitting there watching it going, wow. I mean, they start early, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. We're still working with a family outside the front door to get a child into the building, and successfully, for the record, which is good, but it's a lot of time and effort to do so.
I think if there's a child missing so many days, I won't stand on my child development soapbox, but I do think that there's a bigger issue. So to your point, Joe, of like a parent liaison or whatever the title is that you give that person, I think that there's a system that has to be kind of understood, and it's not that parents are being bad parents. It's that they're really struggling to kind of meet the needs of their children, and we can say that children are, how we kind of, I guess, raise them to be, but children are really their own little people. They have an opinion, and the 3-year-old or the 4-year-old or the 5-year-old who is already struggling is exhausting for a family. And it's not an easy fix. A parent just can't say, come, I'm taking you. I don't think that people understand that it's not that simple to do. So I would fully support if you were able to think about that as a granted position, to really offer support, because that entire family probably needs support, and that child just isn't ready to learn. That child is not, even if you get the child in the building, I'm not sure how successful that child's going to be.
So one of the number one growing, I hate to say it this way because it's going to come out the wrong way, I guess, but one of the growing areas in schools are parent resource centers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's becoming, and you're seeing it used to be very much an urban thing, but the rurals and the suburbans are now starting to do it. It's an area where, you're supporting families as much as possible, and you're checking in, you're making sure that they have the resources they need, and so on and so forth. So that's the general view after 82 days.
Okay. All right, next is the school calendars. Dr. O'Neill.
Okay, so tonight I have a first look at school calendars for the 23-24 school year, as well as the 24-25 school year. So both calendars follow our traditional model, where our staff returns for 2 days prior to Labor Day, where we have our Welcome Back Day and our Full Day Professional Development Day. Students return the Tuesday after Labor Day. So in 23, that would be Tuesday, September 5th. And in 24, that would be Tuesday, September 3rd. For grades 1 through 12, kindergarten's the following day, and Little Lancers is on day 3. Very traditional calendar. You'll note that we have scheduled for the 180 days, plus we also have to schedule 5 snow days as per regulation, so those are there. I do want to mention that days such as early release dates for parent conferences or midterm dates are not on the calendar at this point, because we need a set calendar to start with that, and then we go through and we figure out the terms. And I know we're also waiting on data from the high school in terms of the midterm and final conversation. So with this first draft, last day of school barring no snow days in June of '24 would be the 12th, and in June of '25 would be the 16th. So this is just a first glance, and then we'll make any accommodations or changes you guys want to see and bring them back to the curriculum.
And you don't have to vote 2 years, you can just vote
You
next
can
year.
vote just one if you want.
But it has to be,
2 years.
if you only vote one, it has to be next year though, can't be the year.
Skip it.
Yeah, please.
Can't skip
We're
the
not
year.
voting either tonight, right?
No, you're not gonna
No.
vote either tonight.
So, a question, Jen, about the March, because you know that that's sort of a sticking point for
Yes,
me.
yeah.
That March is a really long month for children who are struggling, so,
Yes.
I'm just wondering, you put and I know we had talked about having sort of an early release day for the district. I wondered if there was a reason why it's sort of the last day of March, if it could be moved at all, or if there was a reason why it was there.
We certainly can. So in the past few years, we've done the last Friday of every month as our early release day for staff professional development, unless it's a vacation week, and then we do it the Friday before the vacation. But we can certainly move it earlier. I don't know that there's any
Yeah, I
holidays
just,
there, but
you know, they go,
we're not married to it.
so February vacation, and then they're
Mhm.
back for a few weeks, perhaps, you know, even the 15th. And then if you look ahead to April, the 12th is an early release day, and then they have full April vacation.
Yes, yeah.
So,
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
When would,
it's just something that maybe we could consider.
Yeah.
is MCAS in March as well?
At this point, the only MCAS dates that are in March are the high school. Usually we see ELA at the, usually roughly the week of the 25th is when we see the high school MCAS. All other MCAS has been moved to April and May. And the high school is the only grade level that still has hard dates. Elementary schools and middle schools, we have a window, usually about a 5-week window, and we work with the building principals and the tech department to kind of spread them out throughout the window.
I've gotten this complaint a lot from parents. Why do we have so many half-days? And I know the students and teachers are gonna kill me, but why do we have so many?
We have half-days for a couple different reasons. Number one is to provide staff with professional development. So as we were discussing earlier tonight about our new math program, we will be using our early release days this spring to provide the professional development and the training for our teachers so that they're comfortable with the new program. That's when this year we've done a lot of our work around IMTSS, looking at student data at the building level and making it those, having those instructional conversations and making decisions. We don't, unfortunately, one of our biggest challenges with professional development, and has been for the 20 years that I've been in Norton, is that the LGN and JCS start times are so far apart that it makes it really difficult for them to get together for any type of collaboration or training except for those half days. It's really the only time we can get them together. And even that, we've about an hour and a half of overlap. The other reason we have half days is for parent conferences. So typically twice a year for elementary, and then once a year at the middle school. And I know we're going to be looking at the concept of parent conferences in more depth as
And
well.
the high school has them for midterms. and
Yes, high school has early release dates for midterms and finals.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, and this might be at least since I've been here, maybe even you, we used to have more time off during the year for professional development, and
Yes.
we went to that
We used to have
half-day
full
model.
PD days.
Yeah, we used to have like 2 or 3
At
a
least
year.
2.
Now we just
Um,
kind of split it over half-days.
Yeah.
So the way that, we've always, our staff, as long as
That's
I've been
what I
in
went to,
Norton,
like,
has
the
always worked
beginning.
182 days. So we used to do a welcome back day, and then we would typically have an election day in November, where we would close, and that would be a PD day for staff. And we probably switched it up, so we still have 182 days, so the number of days hasn't changed. We just front load that extra PD day at the beginning of the year, because we have found that often when we're implementing new programs or new technology, or we have something that we want to share with the staff, it's more beneficial to do it at the beginning of the year than a day in November. So that's why we made that change. It's certainly something that if, you know, we would prefer to move it back to November, we can have that conversation. But in the past, it works for our staff, and it,
We used to have probably at least another 3 to 5 more half-days than we currently have. And at one time, throughout the state, it was every other Thursday. You may recall that. It used to be 2 Thursdays a month was early release. In the TVL, 50% of the districts have that type of a model. Every other week is a half-day. That's how they utilize it. Foxborough has 5 professional development days in their contract.
they work.
So they
those
go
teachers work
180,
180.
and then 5 were 180 and 2. So those 3, that's why they have limited half-days within their schedule.
And that's, Dinesh and Carolyn from negotiations, you remember that was something that we had come forward with, that we wanted to move from 182 to 183, to give us more time for professional development.
I think from a parents who are working standpoint, I would almost rather get rid of some of these half-days and just do days off and do PD days for our teachers.
You gotta pay them.
But yeah, it's a contractual.
You contractually have to pay them.
What do you, yeah, but they have a half-day off anyway.
Well, they have a half-day where they go to professional development and the kids go home, so
And
that
it
they
still
don't have to
counts as,
supervise.
it still counts as
their
100
contract.
or
If the
180
kids aren't
days.
here, it doesn't count as a day. So a half-day still counts to the 180. that
The teachers are still doing their 7-hour day.
Mhm.
These kids are doing it basically 3 hours and a third, 3.5.
So every single half-day, we have PD happening.
Yes.
Yes,
Well,
unless it's parent conferences.
And Wednesday before Thanksgiving,
They get off.
and if the 20, the
Christmas.
2 holiday and the Christmas break, if it backs up.
Yeah,
you have-
depending on what the date is.
Depending on what the date is. Otherwise, it's all, and it could also be, a couple of years ago, we had the anti-bullying, we had the anti-bullying that was put into place, and we had 60 days. We had to create another half-day, if I remember correctly, because of the
Yeah.
timeline. So we're bound by some of those issues as well.
So right now, we have 10 half-days, and there's a potential for school conferences to add.
So you'll add 2 half-days for elementary, 1 in October and 1 in March. And then you'll add 1 half-day for the middle school. And then high school,
Yeah.
depending on what you guys decide to do with midterms.
It's always been a battle of increase the staff days that they get paid. So you have the mandated 180 with the kids, and you have 5 days, 7 days. I know contracts that are 7 days. So it's 7 days of PD. So throughout the year, bang, that's no kids come, teachers are paid. They go through whatever the training may be. And years ago, the trade-off started to become, and this is even before my time as a principal, it started to be, we can't afford it, so this is the model we're gonna use.
And that's why in cases where we can, that we do back them up to a long weekend or the vacation break. So with the hope that families that are going away or have plans that weekend can see that as a little bonus versus another major inconvenience. You know, I certainly understand. I'm a parent of a middle schooler and an elementary schooler in Mansfield. And I'm like, would you guys just have a half day? Like, I have the same questions, but, you know, coming from the perspective. And it's almost like we don't have enough time for staff development and to do all the things we want to do with our teachers. So you're definitely caught between a rock and a hard place.
And then one last question, this is probably out of our control too, but we had this conversation during Veterans Day. Do we have to take that day off?
We do.
Yes.
It's a federal holiday. Can't control
Yeah, I
it.
was gonna say-
Because you know where I stand on that, right? I believe we should have school, we should be celebrating our kids with the veterans that day.
No, what I was
Instead of
thinking
the
is
opposite, but-
you put it on election day, take that day off.
Yeah, well, yeah,
And
we got
then
that one. yeah.
use Veterans Day as a,
Yeah, yeah.
but you can't do
Election
that.
day in 2024 is November 5th.
So how does that look on the calendar where we have the election day off?
So if you look at the 24-25 calendar,
Yeah.
we are
Which is the day out.
we are closed on
National
Tuesday,
election.
November 5th, because it is a presidential election.
Okay.
Would you?
That's the
we weren't
first
asked
time
to
we've done
close.
that in a while, right?
We only closed it, you know, we did not close it for the primary in March of '24. So if you were to look there, we're open that day. The only day we actually put on the calendar to close was the actual election day.
I'm a proponent that I believe that the 2024 election is going to be pretty quiet, so I think we should be able to open up and not have a problem.
So that would just be a day that we're closed. Obviously, no students, no teachers, but central office would still be
So-
open. All of our year-round employees would still be here.
Thinking ahead maybe 3-4 years, if there's another polling location, not a school, i.e. a new town building potentially, doesn't affect us, we could be here. not a big deal.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot there on that question that would have to be discussed further down the road, just because of size, parking, all that stuff. It's
Theoretically, if the schools weren't used for voting, we could be open.
Because I don't understand how, like, years ago, we didn't have any problems and we used 2 schools. Like, when I first moved into town, you voted at one of 2 schools, depending on your district.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem to be an issue then.
There's many of us, I don't reside in the town, but as somebody's experienced other stuff, I have 8 precincts in my town, we're 27,000 people, so we're not huge. We have 8 precincts, 8 different parts that you go to vote, so you don't have these traffic.
Like a
I think the
neighborhood
biggest
polling.
issue is not the building, it's, you guys got 2 main roads.
Yeah.
You got 140 and 123. Those 2 roads get clogged up and it's heck.
Those get
So-
clogged up with nothing going on.
Well, that's another discussion, but, you know, I'm just saying for the election,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where, you know, we're closed.
I don't think we have 5 locations we could vote at in town that could handle even one precinct.
Well, I think the problem is too, is they're spread so thin.
Yeah, I mean, you got
From
1, 2, 3, 4 schools on one route.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So
It's
what
gonna
a
clog
tough
up your
traffic.
way.
Yeah.
So Dan's trying to get rid of the election day off. Nick's trying to get rid of half days and Veterans Day. You guys better hope the kids can't vote, man. You guys like,
Well,
you're
no,
running out
I
of
mean, we've
offense.
always danced around the elections.
Listen, we resolved your issue, which is we're not back before Labor Day with the kids.
Yeah. Listen, my issue is that September 7th is still not listed as a holiday on here.
Either is September 4th.
It's crazy, right?
It's your
What's-
birthday.
what's-
Happy birthday, both of you, in advance.
I get a floating holiday now.
What
My
was,
employer recognized it.
I don't even know if we talked about what was the kind of feedback from Election Day when we held school. That was a little bit of
We
a.
received a letter, if you remember, I shared it with you.
I'm
It's
trying to
from
remember.
From Ray.
Ray Cord.
Cord, thank you.
Prior, I
Sent
know
it.
that there was concern about us keeping school open.
Right, the school system
That
didn't
was just the
receive,
perfect
we didn't
storm.
receive any information in terms of people upset. There was an editorial in the Sun Chronicle that I had in the sand by being open.
That's-
I mean, I gotta run the school system according to
I was
a number
just
of different
wondering
things,
if-
including the policies and procedures that is established by the local school, so.
We have barely anyone vote.
I'm sorry?
We have barely anybody vote.
Right.
If we were having 10,000 people show up to vote, then I could see a problem. I mean,
Well, I
these town
think
elections, you're getting.
That day was the perfect storm, so it was the first day of school,
Yeah, people
we had
came back.
construction
They came back.
So
projects.
town elections, remember, the nice thing about town
Yeah,
elections is
and
they're on
then-
Saturdays.
Yes.
Right, all town elections. What happens that's a curveball is, the special elections that take place that we have no control over, opening of school, right? And, you know, it's the Tuesday after.
Solar project and everything, and all the
Right, and then
containers.
added to that, and then the presidential election, we've been pretty consistent about either being fully closed or having a PD day, and that would be the 2 options we would put before you to decide as well. If you
Yeah,
think
no
about it.
problem.
So it goes as it goes.
All right, next is any other business?
Just the homework assignment, I guess is what I'll call it.
Budget?
Yeah, which is just the general, March 2nd. We'll have 2 items on there, we'll have the budget and we'll have
Did you let them know
the
this?
veterans, sorry, what was that?
And the award?
Oh, and there's a new Student Achievement Award that's coming out from the state. I think I shared it with you already. There was an example given, and we should be getting some names soon for our students. That was a fake one. They had to send out a second email that said, hey, that's not my kid. I was like, that is a fake one that they were doing. It wasn't, they
Why
were
didn't
giving
they
you.
go with Jane Doe?
It's like, I know that I don't have that, I know that that's not my kid. It's like, that's the stuff that makes you feel a little quirky.
I got 2 things. One, I got reached out to by a parent, I just kind of want to clarify exactly what happened. Track bus on a cold weather day, I was supposed to go to Boston.
Yeah.
Have we cleared that up, just to kind of figure out
Yeah, what
why that
happened was
happened?
the bus wouldn't start.
Okay.
That was the issue. The bus would not start, so we ended up.
The cold, so the track was supposed to go to a meet.
It was a
bus.
Saturday morning.
The real cold day. The track was supposed to go to a meet, bus never showed, apparently.
Bus didn't
Wouldn't
start.
People know
The
that.
person was there, the bus just would not start. Yep.
So how did they get that?
They went with, I believe they got, if I remember correctly, I think they got picked up by another community that drove down there, picked them up and brought them up together. I remember. I'll have
Yeah.
Aaron.
The
send-
parent said to me, and again, I don't know exactly what happened, she's, I'm not gonna say her name.
Secondhand.
No, she's
Oh.
kind of very well involved in town.
Gotcha.
She said some kids missed the meet, that could have been a state qualifier. It kind of wanted a clearer picture on exactly what we're going to do if that happens again. What's a backup plan, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'll ask Aaron to give you the specifics and how he specifically dealt with it.
And then one other thing, and I think it's the elephant in the room, if you will, I'm not quite sure why it wasn't on the agenda. Back to this walkout thing. I don't know, do we want to put it on the next agenda, or do we want to talk about it now, just in terms of, we've gotten a lot of information back and forth between, through email and whatnot. Probably, maybe, I know there was like a policy written up of what we're looking at and what admin's kind of coming up with, but I don't know if it's something that we want to, if it's policy, we got to have our opinions on it, obviously, and get something in there, so I don't know what we want to do there. I guess I'll refer to the chair.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to include it in a future meeting, just send me an email, we can add it.
Perfect. That was it for me.
Carolyn, anything?
No thanks.
Dennis?
Just a reminder, special election Saturday.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, polls open, 8 to 3, I think.
8 AM to 3 PM.
And it's at Norton Middle School only. So just because people still drive up to other places in town. And it's a special election, so should get results pretty quick after the 3 o'clock closing.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night, thank you.